Beautiful. Well,
Super. I have no
so the,
idea where we were.
the last thing I heard, I think it was like industrial complex or something like this. And then it trailed off for a long time, and then my mind went other places trying to figure it
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
It could have been like
Right, school.
two sentences thrown together. So, you were we were I asked the question about Martin Shaw, I think is the last time I
Okay.
said anything. So
Alrighty. And I
good
was saying that
stories and
yes, the death cult has a very good narrative. The there is no alternative whole thing. And it's very good at promoting it. Did we get to the bit where I said Nate Hagen says this culture converts barrels of oil into microliters of dopamine, and that's its function? Um, because that's what we're doing, and it's feeding certain parts of us, and all of the work on dopamine structures. We don't need to go into the neurophysiology particularly, but the point about dopamine is that it's never enough.
mm,
The point about serotonin is it's always enough. If we get a dopamine hit, it's never quite as good as the last dopamine hit. We need another one more and faster, which is why social media gets nastier. Because one of the things that triggers our dopamine release fastest is righteous anger. The idea that I am right and I have just had proof that the other person is wrong really gives us lots and lots of our little dopamine hits. Wean ourselves off that to the serotonin mesh of community ends up, feeds the parts of us that are born wanting to be a part of a community, but it's not wholly compatible with consistent feed of dopamine. So we need, would say, new stories that will take us forward into out of the trauma culture of the dopamine hits into the initiation culture, a new kind of initiation culture. We can't go back. We don't want to go back. Even if we did, it's not possible. We cannot put the genie back in the bottle. So how do we build ourselves the stories that will break us out of the existing paradigm and allow us the freedom, the emotional and the spiritual and the intellectual freedom to step forward into a new way of being, a new way of doing things, a new way of relating to ourselves and each other in the web of life. Easy. All we have to
easy.
do is do it.
All we have to do is do it. No,
Yeah.
it is interesting to me when I think about stories, and I let your words percolate through to my understanding. So half of my ancestors are Celtic, Irish and British, and the other half are Polish and Lithuanian to some degree. And so there's this old church, Southern Slav type, and then the ancient Celtic type, and and I dive into these two richly mythological cultures, oral storytellers, winter inhabiting peoples of the northern hemispheres, the far northern hemispheres. You have this consolidation of the story being told around the winter fire. Like that is a large modality in those cultures. And in many cultures, obviously, around the world, the winter is the storytelling season. And when I think about stories being located in such a way, next to the hearth, surrounded by community, in that warmth of just living in this common way inside of the seasons, I have this understanding of time. And
Mm.
I should say I feel this idea of time, percolate through, and it's impacted by your words. And I'm sitting with your book, Dreaming the Eagle, next to me, and it's a large book. I mean, this is the American, hardback version, and it's substantive. There's a lot of words to pick through. The meaning is so cached and held well in those words. It's not a 10-second, Instagram reel, if you will. And I wonder, in proper storytelling, held within the seasons and the winter season, the hearth, the fire, etc. But obviously we don't have that, right? This is a book, right? We don't have storytellers. You're not sitting inside of the heart. My family's, home with us telling these stories, although you're always welcome. You're always welcome here. Um, anyways, my point, there's the conflict of time, here in the modern era because of technology, because of, like you were saying, this dopamine, these constant dopamine hits of, righteous anger, I think is how you phrased it. I love that. Um, we want things to be moving so much faster, right? Time is not really like as the phrase is time is of essence, of the essence, right? No,
Yeah.
no, no. Time is the constraint. It's the limit. We can only live in time. And so it's not the essence, it's the limit. Totally different perspective. How does time play with story in stories well told?
Gosh, that's a huge question, Daniel. Two things come up. One is Bayo Komalafi saying the times are urgent, we must slow down.
Mm,
And then I was listening to a meditation teacher online, I cannot remember who, talking about when we become fully present, our time thresholds shift and our capacity to engage with the energetics of time becomes different, which is a concept I would like to explore more. Because stories, exactly as you say, require that we give them the time that they need. We have to an extent, absorb the worldview of the story, unless it's a 30-second TikTok video, in which case there's a lot of framing that goes into that, but it balances on the top of consensus reality and just takes it that little tiny bit further. If what we're trying to do is what we said earlier, is to break the bounds, move the paradigm, transcend the paradigm of consensus reality in the predatory capital arena, we need to ease into that, because we're going to be going against what's the pretty rigid scaffolding that has been set in people. And that will take time. I don't think you can blow it apart in one go. I think people try with medicine drugs. We can look into that with medicine plants. But
Mm.
on the whole, if it's going to settle, we need to give things the time to ease through and to rewire our brains a little bit. And it's not something you can impose on people. I really would like that people who are writing, particularly movies and TV, which are most people's kind of fiction of choice these days, that they start to write ways forward to a future that works, that do break the paradigm. I have this dream of, if every producer could only get scripts that were fully embedded in bioregionalism and regenerative economics and regenerative agriculture and the exploration of what would it be like to be at the interbecoming of the emergent edge, they would have to make them because there's nothing else. And then people would watch them because there's nothing else. And change would happen quite fast, I think. It wouldn't take many Marvel movies that were embedded not in power dynamics and zero-sum games, but regenerative culture, for things to begin to change. It hasn't happened yet. I hold it open as a possibility. And then the last thing that comes up for me is this concept of, what is it to be a good ancestor and to embed ourselves in deep time?
Mm.
My whole life is aimed at now at finding the ways to lay the foundations for a future that the generations who come after us will look back and say of us that, obviously we left it a long way too late. But when it really mattered, we got our act together, we brought all of our creativity into play, and we did set the framework for a future where they are thriving and flourishing as an integral part of the web of life on a planet where life thrives. How do we get to that? And part of it, exactly as you've alluded to, is we shift our concept of time. We stop asking for instant response within a very, and we allow for a longer term response within a much, much wider frame. And there are people already working on that. There's a library, I think, somewhere in Sweden, where well-known authors have written books that will not be published until after they've died. By definition, this book cannot come into being until you are dead. Which, as an author, that's quite a scary thing to do. I'm going to write this and I will get no feedback at all from anybody in this lifetime. Whoa, that's a brave thing, but it's interesting. So there, yeah, opening time up. I think you're right. I think you put your finger on something. It's going to be really important as we go forward.
Now, how true is that? How just paralyzingly true that is. Both in the library with the authors and in our own lives as we live what you're saying. When you really become, or when you really enter the thought of becoming an ancestor, what does that really mean? All of a sudden, you really do have to let go of time, because you're not trying to solve the problem by the end of the week or by the end of the year or by a certain year, 2030. If we don't reach these climate goals, these things are going to happen. But you let go of that concept entirely. And you say, what can I do in my life, whatever that means? It could be one day, it could be another, 50 years, whatever that may be. And, what can we do patiently? As you said, the quote, the times are urgent, we must slow down. I think it's a brilliant quote. I had a friend, Lakota Sundancer, here in the Central Plains, Western Hemisphere,
Mm.
and I was talking with him in the writing of this new book because I was tied up in this very social, modern, that is, modern social narrative that the climate is in crisis and we have to do something right now. We have to act. And I was talking to a lot of different people, Charles Eisenstein, and then just all these other, story of separation versus connection and interbeing and all this, good juice, if you will. And I was a little bit overcome with it, because to some
Mm.
degree, my wife and I, we run a regenerative farm. We call it a wildland here in Virginia, 400 acres of cattle, sheep, and goats and such. And every day you're really, running into this changing climate, as everyone is, around the world. It's 55
Yeah.
degrees, like I said in the intro here, in the middle of February. All of our animals have their woolly winter coats, and they're hot. I mean,
Mm.
the seasons are changing. It's negative 10 degrees last week, and it's 60 degrees this week, and it's raining and it's sleeting and snowing, and life is really struggling to keep up. And so you're constantly reminded of this fact. Anyone who is attuned to the seasons or attuned to the land around them, or even the land around them is attuned to them, and it works both ways, obviously. We're really running up into the hurdle that the climate is truly changing. And, in the beginning of writing of this book, I was trying to tease out what my true opinions were. What is my true feelings here? What am I feeling? And my friend, the Lakota Sundancer, his name is Oaxaca Topa. It translates four arrows. He said, Daniel, you're visualizing this all wrong. He said, if you, by the end of your life, could dream enough dreams that your grandchildren could walk in happily, you've done
Mm.
enough. Like, don't do anything else. Just dream and let your grandchildren walk in them. And uh, and even now I get chills saying that because it's
Yeah.
so relieving.
Yes.
The
Yes.
stress, and even the corresponding dopamine that surrounds the solving of the stress of these very modern climate crisis based problems totally recedes into the background when we start to vision on dreaming, which is why I was so excited. I mean, the book Dreaming the Eagle is obviously, and I'll let people read it. I'm not going to say too much, but it's heavily based into the dreamers. I think in the book, if I have it right, the dreamers are those that dream. Those are the druids, as I
Yes.
understand.
Yes, it is. I
You,
just didn't want to use the word druids because it has very specific, quite weird connotations, particularly in the UK. So dreaming for me seemed a better, it was a doing verb rather than a label verb, or label
yes,
noun, sorry.
yes, yes. And so there's a connection there. I bring that up only to stimulate maybe thoughts in your head because I want to stop talking and rambling. W- w- how do you see dreaming and time and story working together to truly co-create this idea of a new world in some
Oh,
sort of emergent way?
what a good question. So, in the reality that I inhabit, dreaming is the only thing that matters. We dream with the dream of the land. We dream with the dream of the web of life. We are the nodes within the web of life that have agency and self-reflection. A very brief aside, when I came back from Schumacher, I was wondering what to do, and I thought I'd given up writing novels because I thought they were too long term. It takes too long to write, it takes too long. The whole publishing cycle is slow, and by the time it's out, it's obsolete, and why would you bother? I've got over that now. But I sat with my wife with the fire in the winter solstice of 2018, and we sit with the winter fire and we bring to everything that the year has given us, and then we open the doors for what the new year might give. And I brought that particular year, I had been teaching the shamanic dreaming for 18 years, just about. And I'd finally got the first group had gone all the way around the circle. The circle's only got 10 stations on it, but it had taken a long time. And of the thousands of people who'd started out, nine had gone all over. And I was so, this, hey guys, look, we got it. Nine of them, aren't they amazing? Truly fantastic and wonderful, deep dreamers, glorious. And the fire said, nine people every 18 years is not going to cut it. You need to start teaching at scale. Oh, really? What does that look like? So I was sitting there feeling a bit deflated. And then a vision arose. I, and this sounds I don't often see things as clearly as this. So once in a while, something happens really clearly. And in this particular case, there was a vision of the Earth as seen from space, the really iconic blue pearl floating through the blackness of space. And around it were millions upon millions of very, very fine threads of the color of moonlight. It was night. I've seen it since in daytime, and they're the color of sunlight. So light, threads of light, weaving across, going around and around in all the dimensions across the globe. And every place they crossed was a node of consciousness. And some of those nodes of consciousness were human, and most of them weren't. And so this was together with the instruction to teach at scale, and I had to work out what that meant, and that's where Accidental Gods, the membership and the podcast arose. However, that image is still there as one of the guiding motifs of where my life is going at the moment is, if I am one of those nodes of consciousness, what is my role? And my understanding today, and by tomorrow it could be different, is that I open my awareness to the best extent that I am able to the web of life. And I ask, what do you want of me? And I step into the answers. And I dream the answers forward. Because human intention, the capacity, if we hone our intention, if we focus it, human intention is an extraordinarily powerful force. And the question then is, what is driving that intention? If what is driving that intention is accumulation and extraction and the commodification of grief, then that gets us to where we are just now. If our intention is the thriving and the flourishing of the web of life and a sense of the freedom and the wildness and the aliveness of the magic of that, then that's what we dream forward. And exactly as your Lakota friend said, and as you found, the responsibility of having to figure stuff out is gone with that. And it's such a relief. My shoulders dropped, about 10 degrees of, okay, all I have to do is keep asking and then to the best of my ability in any given moment to respond. And that requires flexibility. It requires, last year you wanted me to be a homeopath and now I'm writing a book. Okay, that's not what I was expecting, but let me throw myself into writing the book. And then next year I might be doing something different, which is not how our trauma culture structures itself. You've got to be, on the hamster wheel of pain bills until you die, and anything else is going to be a catastrophe. But more and more people are seeing, I think, and feeling and living that the cult has had its day. So if we can dream forward to realities that we would be proud to leave to the generations that follow us. I don't have kids, but I'm really happy with the concept of spiritual ancestors. You can be an ancestor in spirit. You don't have to just be an ancestor in blood. You can be both. Right. So that is the answer. I think I could go on, but that's a really basic answer to the question. Did that make sense? And did it answer the question that you actually asked?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Dream the answers forward. I think that summed it up in 4 beautiful short words. I think the power of stories still has potency, and that's exciting,
Totally. It's how we express our dreams.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it energetically, but it's if we have language, why not use it?
Right.
And if you can use both together, that's grand.
Right. Well, Manda, I could talk all day, and we'll have to do this again in person, over the internet, whatever we have the ability to do. Before I let you go, so I've mentioned Dreaming the Eagle, which is, I believe, book 1 of a 4-book series on Boudica.
Right. Yeah.
If people were to start with your stories, where do you advise them to start? Because you have so many books. Do they start with the Boudica series?
I would start with the Boudica series, yeah. I mean, obviously, after the 30th of May, I'd start with Any Human Power, because that's of now, and it has the dreaming is right through it. In fact, one of the characters from Boudica ended up in it, which surprised me enormously. But yes, I think having listened to this podcast, if it's resonated with you, then start with the Boudica books for sure.
Amazing. Amazing. How else may people find you and learn more about Accidental Gods, your writing, your courses, the dreaming?
My wife is a website designer, so I have a lot of websites. So the dreaming, if you want to train with us in the dreaming, and we do online trainings, the pandemic taught us this was a possible thing. The early stages are all curated and run now by my apprentice, and that's dreamingawake.co.uk. Dreaming Awake, all one word. Accidental Gods is Accidental Gods, all one word, dot life. And there's a membership there and the podcast is there. Or you find the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. If people are interested in writing, we did the Throughtopia masterclass, and Throughtopia is spelled THRU, Topia, which is how do we write the way through from exactly where we are to where we need to be so we don't stop writing the bloody dystopias. And utopias are great, but there's always a jump cut. And you don't see how you got there. You see what the world is like, and we need to know how we get there. So we are creating the Throughtopian Writers Association, I hope. And so that's throughtopia:life. And then the ordinary writing is Manda Scott, all one word, all lowercase, .co.uk. I could send you all those.
Yes, please. Send me all of that. It'll be in the show notes.
Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again, Manda. It's I've really enjoyed it, which I think speaks for the listener as well. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's been a delight, and anytime you'd like me to come back, I'm more than happy. Thank you.
Beautiful.